She threw the word gal at me like cheap change, right there in front of the conference room where blueprints of 6 patents hung on display. The very innovations keeping her father's company alive each quarter. The way her eyes gleamed with that peculiar brand of entitled contempt. That practiced dismissiveness only trust fund babies perfect by 24. That was the moment I knew I wouldn't just answer with words. Some lessons require a different currency altogether. One measured in collapsed stock prices and emergency board meetings. My name is Rachel Harlow. And for 12 years, I've been the ghost in Vanguard Systems' machine, the one who makes things work while others take the bows. At 38, I've learned that real power doesn't announce itself in corner offices or reserved parking spots. It hides in patent numbers, in lines of code that hold entire infrastructures together. In the quiet understanding that without you, everything stops. The Austin heat was already oppressive at 7:30 that Monday morning when I badged into our building on Lamar Boulevard. The glass and steel structure tried so hard to look like Silicon Valley, but the Texas sun had a way of exposing pretense, making everything shimmer with an almost desperate gleam. I preferred the old building we'd occupied 5 years ago, honest brick and mortar. No illusions about what we were, a mid-tier tech company surviving on the ingenuity of a few and the ambitions of many. My office, if you could call the converted storage room an office, sat at the end of the 3rd floor's east wing. No windows, just fluorescent lights that hummed a constant B-flat, and walls lined with whiteboards covered in equations that might as well have been hieroglyphics to most of the executive team. This was where the real work happened, where 6 patents had been born from countless nights of staring at impossible problems until they cracked open like eggs, revealing solutions so elegant they seemed obvious in hindsight. The coffee maker in the break room was already gurgling when I arrived, its tired motor protesting another day of service. I poured myself a cup in my usual mug, chipped ceramic with a faded IEE logo, and watched the parking lot fill up through the narrow window. A new Porsche Cayenne, metallic silver, pulled into the spot marked CTO. Daniel Mercer had arrived. He'd been with us for exactly 2 weeks, brought in from Nexus Industries with promises of fresh perspective and dynamic leadership. The board practically genuflected when they announced his hiring, their press release laden with buzzwords about synergy and innovation acceleration. What they didn't mention was that Nexus had quietly let him go after their latest product launch spectacularly failed, a detail I'd discovered through a friend who still worked there. I returned to my desk, pulling up the morning's batch of error logs from our main product, the Quantum Framework, a distributed computing system that had become the backbone for dozens of Fortune 500 companies' data operations. My second patent, US 10 234,567, made the whole thing possible. An algorithm that could predict and prevent cascade failures across networked systems. Without it, Quantum would be just another unstable platform in a market full of them. The morning passed in familiar rhythm. Code review. A junior engineer stopping by with questions about load balancing. An email from legal about renewing the patent licenses for the quarter. That last one made me pause. Every 3 months, like clockwork. I signed the renewal. A formality. They called it a safeguard. I knew it to be. Around 11, voices drifted down the hallway. Daniel's performative baritone mixed with others I didn't recognize. He was doing the tour, showing off his new domain to someone. I didn't look up when they passed my door, but I heard him pause. "That's just one of our R&D rooms," he said, his tone dismissive. "We're planning to consolidate that department next quarter. Efficiency optimization." The footsteps continued, but something in his voice had carried a warning. In my experience, when executives started talking about efficiency, it meant someone was about to lose something. I saved my work, backed it up to my personal drive, a habit that had served me well over the years, and made a mental note to review my employment contract that evening. The Austin skyline blazed orange through the break room window as the day wound down. I was refilling my coffee when Margaret from HR appeared beside me, her expression carefully neutral in that way HR people perfect when delivering news they know you won't like. "Rachel, Mr. Mercer would like to see everyone in conference room A in 15 minutes. He's introducing someone. I nodded, already knowing this wouldn't be good. In 12 years at Vanguard, I'd developed an instinct for corporate disasters, the way farmers can smell rain coming. The air in the building had that same electric tension, that pause before lightning strikes. Conference room A was our showpiece, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows and the wall where we displayed patent certificates like trophies. My 6 hung in the center, their gold seals catching the afternoon light. I took my usual seat at the back, notebook open, pen ready. The pose of someone engaged but not eager, present but not prominent. Daniel entered with the confidence of someone who'd never built anything from scratch, followed by a young woman in a designer dress that probably cost more than most employees' monthly salary. She had that particular shine of privilege, the kind that comes from never having to prove yourself before being handed opportunities. "Everyone," Daniel began, his smile as sharp as his suit. "I'd like you to meet Clara, our newest addition to the marketing team. She comes to us with fresh ideas about brand positioning and social engagement." Clara, no last name offered, but the resemblance was clear in the jawline, the set of the eyes. Daniel Mercer's daughter had just been given a job at the company whose technology she couldn't begin to understand. Clara's eyes swept the room with the practiced disinterest of someone who'd been taught that appearing bored was a form of power. When they landed on me, there was a flicker of assessment. Female, older, dressed in practical clothes rather than performance fashion. I watched her file me away as irrelevant. Clara brings a unique perspective from her time at... Daniel paused, and I knew he was about to lie. Various startups in the Bay Area. She'll be focusing on repositioning our brand for the younger demographic. Someone from sales asked about her experience with B2B marketing, since that was 90% of our business. Clara's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. "Oh, I don't think we should limit ourselves to those old paradigms," she said, her voice carrying that particular valley affectation where every statement sounds like a question except when it shouldn't. "B2B, B2C, these are just letters, right? What matters is the story we're telling." I kept my expression neutral. But inside, something cold was taking shape. We were an infrastructure technology company. Our clients were CTOs and system architects who cared about uptime and processing speeds, not stories. Daniel was beaming at his daughter like she'd just solved world hunger. "Clara will be sitting in on all department meetings to get a full picture of our operations. I expect everyone to give her their complete cooperation." The meeting was breaking up when it happened. I was gathering my things, preparing to slip out quietly, when Clara's voice cut through the small talk. "Oh, wait. You there? Gal." The room went silent. Not the gradual quieting of conversation winding down, but the sudden cessation of sound that happens when everyone simultaneously realizes something inappropriate has occurred. I turned slowly. Clara was pointing at me with one manicured finger, her head tilted in a parody of confusion. "You're the one who does the..." She waved her hand vaguely. "Computer stuff, right? The coding or whatever. Daddy mentioned we had some gals in technical." The word hung in the air like a slap. Gal, not woman, not engineer, not even my name, which was clearly displayed on my badge. Gal. Like I was a waitress in a 1950s diner, not the person whose innovations were literally displayed on the wall behind her. "I'm Rachel Harlow," I said, my voice steady as steel. "Senior R&D engineer and systems architect." "Oh." Clara's smile didn't waver. "Well, Rachel. Can I call you Rachel? I'll need you to prepare a presentation for me about what exactly it is you do here. Something simple, you know. I'm more of a big picture person." She didn't wait for my response, already turning to chat with someone from marketing, someone whose designer shoes and statement jewelry marked them as worth knowing. I stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of the room's uncomfortable silence. A few colleagues wouldn't meet my eyes. Others looked sympathetic, but said nothing. Daniel was already ushering his daughter toward his office, his hand protective on her back, neither of them sparing me another glance. Marcus, One of the younger engineers sidled up to me as I left the conference room. "That was messed up," he whispered. "Yes," I agreed. "It was. Are you going to say something to HR?" I looked at him, 25, talented, still believing in the system's ability to self-correct. "What would be the point? She's the CTO's daughter." "But that's exactly why." "Marcus," I stopped him gently. "Choose your battles. This isn't yours." He looked like he wanted to argue, but I was already walking away, my mind spinning through possibilities like a program running through conditional statements. If Clara was this bold on day one, in front of an audience, what would she be like when no one was watching? Back in my office, I pulled up the patent database and reviewed my filings. 6 patents, all assigned to me personally, not to Vanguard Systems. It had been a negotiation point when I joined. I developed the technology. They'd get exclusive license to use it as long as I remained an employee in good standing. My lawyer had called it an insurance policy. The board had been too eager to acquire my skills to push back. I opened the licensing agreement, reading through the termination clauses with new attention. 30 days notice required for any modification. Immediate cessation of use rights upon my departure from the company, voluntary or otherwise. The company had the right to purchase the patents at fair market value, but that value would be determined by an independent assessor, not by them. My phone buzzed with an email from Clara, sent to the entire R&D department. "Hey gals and guys, super excited to be working with all of you. I'll be scheduling one-on-ones this week to really dive deep into what you all do. Remember, there are no stupid questions, except the ones you don't ask. XOXO, Clara. XOXO. She'd signed a professional email with hugs and kisses. I stared at it for a long moment, then forwarded it to my personal email. Documentation, my lawyer had always said, was everything. That night, I went home to my apartment in South Austin, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat on my balcony watching the bats emerge from under the Congress Avenue Bridge. The city sparkled below. All that tech money transforming skylines and displacing communities. The eternal Austin contradiction. I thought about Clara's eyes, the casual cruelty in them, the absolute certainty that she belonged and I didn't. I thought about Daniel's silent endorsement, the way he'd let his daughter reduce me to gal without a word of correction. They had no idea what they'd just started. No idea that the gal they'd dismissed held the keys to their kingdom in 6 patent numbers, in lines of code they couldn't read, in systems they couldn't understand. I raised my glass to the darkening sky. "Call me gal," I said to the empty air. "We'll see who's laughing when the lights go out." The next 3 weeks unfolded like a slow-motion car crash. Clara embedded herself in our department meetings with the tenacity of a parasite, taking notes in a pink leather journal while understanding nothing. She'd interrupt complex technical discussions to ask if we'd considered making it more user-friendly, or suggest we leverage synergies with influencer partnerships. The first time she credited herself with my work was subtle. During a board presentation about our quarterly improvements to the quantum framework, Daniel mentioned the new stability protocols. Clara leaned forward, touching his arm lightly. "Oh, that's the optimization I suggested after reviewing the system logs," she said, her voice carrying just enough false modesty to sound believable. "Remember, Daddy, Mr. Mercer?" I mentioned how the redundancy pattern seemed inefficient. I sat frozen, my coffee cup halfway to my lips. Those optimization protocols came from a 70-hour week I'd spent tracing cascade failures through millions of lines of logs. Clara had been at the company for exactly 5 days when I'd implemented them. Daniel beamed. "That's right. Clara has been invaluable in identifying areas for improvement." Not one board member questioned how a 24-year-old with no technical background had diagnosed complex system architecture issues. They nodded along, already rewriting history in their minds. After the meeting, I confronted Daniel in the hallway. "Those protocols were my design. I have the commit history to prove it." He barely slowed his stride. "Rachel, we're all on the same team here. Clara is helping us see things from a fresh perspective. I'd hope someone with your experience would be more supportive of young talent. Young talent that's taking credit for my work? He stopped then, turning to face me with an expression I recognized, the look of a man who'd already decided you were a problem to be managed. I think you're being a bit territorial. Clara mentioned you've been less than welcoming. Perhaps you should consider whether your attitude aligns with our company values of collaboration and innovation. The threat was as subtle as a brick through a window. The next week, my access permissions started changing. First, I couldn't view the product roadmap anymore. Streamlining information flow, according to the IT ticket. Then, my GitHub admin rights were revoked, reducing me to contributor status on repositories I'd created. My protests were met with bureaucratic doublespeak about security protocols and compliance requirements. Marcus found me in the server room one evening, running diagnostics on a system I could no longer access remotely. "They moved your parking spot," he said quietly. "What?" "Your reserved spot. It's been reassigned to Clara. You're in general parking now." It was petty, childish even, but I understood the message. You don't matter. You're replaceable. You're just a gal who should be grateful for whatever scraps we throw you. The breaking point came during the monthly all-hands meeting. Daniel was presenting our Q3 achievements, and there, on slide 14, was my newest innovation. A predictive load balancing algorithm that would save our clients millions in server costs. But the credit line read, "Developed by Clara Mercer and the innovation team." "I'm particularly proud of Clara's contribution here," Daniel said, clicking to the next slide showing performance metrics. She identified a critical inefficiency in our existing system and proposed this elegant solution. Clara stood up, doing a little mock bow. I couldn't have done it without the help of the technical gals who implemented my vision. Sometimes it just takes fresh eyes to see what's been there all along. The technical gals, plural, reducing me and the two other female engineers to anonymous supporters of her fictional genius. I felt something snap inside me, clean and sharp like a broken bone. But I didn't react. I clapped along with everyone else, my smile as fixed as a mask. Let them think they'd won. Let them believe I was beaten. That night, I called my lawyer, Janet Zhao, from my car in the parking garage. "They're systematically erasing my contributions and reassigning credit to the CTO's daughter," I explained, my voice calm despite the rage simmering beneath. "Do you have documentation?" "Everything. Emails, commit histories, time-stamped development logs, even security footage of me working alone in the lab when these supposed collaborations happened. And your patents? Still mine. The licensing agreement is ironclad. They only have usage rights while I'm an employee in good standing." There was a pause. "Rachel, are you thinking what I think you're thinking? They want to play games with ownership and credit? Fine. Let's see how they enjoy playing without any toys at all. This could get ugly. They'll come after you with everything they have." I looked up at the Vanguard Systems logo glowing on the building's facade. All that glass and steel built on foundations they didn't even know were mine. "Janet, they called me gal, and thought that was the end of it. They have no idea what ugly looks like." The next morning, I arrived at work, same as always, smiled in the hallways, sat quietly in meetings while Clara pontificated about disrupting the disruption and thinking outside the box we've put around thinking outside the box. I even nodded when Daniel announced that Clara would be leading a new initiative to modernize our core technology. They thought I was broken, subdued, another middle-aged woman who'd learned her place in their new order. They were wrong. In my locked desk drawer sat a folder growing thicker by the day. Every slight documented. Every stolen idea cataloged. Every piece of evidence that would prove Clara Mercer was nothing but a fraud in designer clothes. And her father was the emperor who'd bought her imaginary new clothes with company resources. But that was just for the lawyers and the board. The real revenge would be much simpler, much cleaner. All I had to do was walk away. And when I did, I'd take my patents with me, leaving them with a hollow framework, a beautiful car with no engine, a kingdom built on foundations that belonged to the gal they'd dismissed. The thought made me smile as I typed, my fingers flying across the keyboard, adding one last enhancement to the system they'd soon lose forever. Late nights in my home office became my sanctuary. While Clara played CEO's daughter at the company, I studied documents that told a different story, one written in legal language and sealed with my signature. The patents were more than just paper. They were the DNA of Vanguard systems, woven so deeply into the infrastructure that removing them would be like pulling bones from a living body. Patent US 10-234,567 controlled the cascade failure prevention. Patent US 10-789,012 managed the distributed load balancing. Patent US 11-345,608 handled the predictive analytics engine. 3 more covered various optimization protocols. Together, they were the circulatory system of a technology that generated $40 million in annual revenue. The licensing agreements I'd negotiated 12 years ago were masterpieces of foresight. My lawyer at the time had called me paranoid for insisting on quarterly renewal clauses and immediate termination upon my departure. Now, those clauses read like prophecy. I pulled up the contract again, highlighting the critical section. Licensor, Rachel Harlow, grants licensee, Vanguard Systems, Inc., non-exclusive, non-transferable rights to utilize said patents solely during licensor's employment with licensee. Upon termination of employment for any reason, all rights revert immediately to licensor, with licensee required to cease all use within 24 hours or face penalties of $100,000 per day per patent. The truly beautiful part was subsection 7.3.2. Licensee acknowledges that the patents represent foundational technology critical to operations. Licensee waives any claim to ownership or derivative rights, regardless of subsequent modifications or implementations. Daniel Mercer had never read this. I was certain of it. The previous CTO had signed off on it. The board had rubber-stamped it, and everyone had forgotten about it because I'd been the reliable engineer who never caused problems, never demanded attention, never threatened to leave. On my laptop, I opened a secure folder labeled Insurance. Inside were the original patent filings, the prototype documentation, the development logs, everything time-stamped and notarized. But more importantly, there were emails from the early days, including one from the former CEO calling my innovations the breakthrough that will define Vanguard's next decade. I'd also been quietly documenting every system built on my patents. The dependency web was staggering. Our flagship quantum framework would collapse without them. The new AI-driven analysis tool Clara had been bragging about in interviews, built entirely on my predictive engine, the government contract Daniel had just signed, it specifically required our patented cascade prevention technology. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Emergency meeting tomorrow. Clara's announcing something big. I texted back a simple thumbs up, then returned to my research. On my second monitor, I pulled up information about Orion Dynamics, Vanguard's primary competitor. They'd been trying to reverse engineer our technology for years, always coming close but never quite matching our performance. Their CTO, Kenji Yamamoto, had once offered me a job with a 70% salary increase. I'd turned him down out of loyalty. Loyalty. The word tasted bitter now. I drafted an email to Kenji but didn't send it. Not yet. Timing was everything, and I wanted Clara and Daniel to dig their hole a little deeper first. The next morning's emergency meeting was held in the main auditorium. Clara stood at the podium in a white suit that probably cost more than most employees' monthly rent, her smile radiant with unearned confidence. I'm thrilled to announce that I'll be presenting our technology at the Global Innovation Summit next month, she said, clicking through slides that showcased my work with her name attached. This is an incredible opportunity to position Vanguard as the thought leader in distributed computing. The Global Innovation Summit, where industry leaders gathered, where reputations were made, where patents were noticed by people who understood their value. I'll be demonstrating our proprietary cascade prevention system, Clara continued, which I've been instrumental in developing. I felt Marcus tense beside me. He knew the truth. Several of the engineers did. But they also knew their mortgages, their families, their need for stability. They stayed silent. Daniel took the podium next. Clara's presentation will coincide with our Series C funding announcement. We're seeking $50 million in investment to scale our patented technology globally. Patented technology. My technology. They were about to raise $50 million on the foundation of my work while erasing my existence from the narrative. After the meeting, I found a quiet spot and called Janet. They're going to the Global Innovation Summit. They're raising Series C funding, all based on my patents. Do you have proof they're claiming ownership? Clara just said proprietary in front of 200 employees. The funding deck will undoubtedly claim full ownership of the IP. That's fraud if they don't disclose the licensing structure to investors. Exactly. There was a pause. Rachel, if you pull those patents during their funding round, it'll destroy them. The investors will run. The stock will crater. The board will demand answers. You could face lawsuits. They'll claim sabotage, breach of fiduciary duty, intentional interference with business. They can claim whatever they want. The contracts are clear, my patents, my rules. That afternoon, I submitted my formal request for Q4 licensing renewal, as I had every quarter for 12 years. But this time, I added an addendum. Please note that any public misrepresentation of patent ownership may result in immediate termination of licensing agreements as per Section 12.4.1. It was a shot across the bow, but subtle enough that only a careful legal review would catch it. Given Daniel's style, I doubted anyone would read it closely until it was too late. Clara stopped by my office that afternoon, her perfume preceding her like a toxic cloud. Rachel, she said, not bothering to knock. I need you to prepare a technical brief for my summit presentation, something that explains the patents in simple terms. You know, for the investors who aren't technical. I looked up from my screen, meeting her eyes steadily. Of course, I'll make sure it's very clear who owns what. She laughed, that tinkling glass sound again. Oh, you're funny. Just remember, we're all Team Vanguard here. What's good for the company is good for all of us little people, right? Little people. She'd promoted me from gal to little people. Right, I said, turning back to my screen. I'll have it ready by Monday. She flounced out, satisfied that the help had been properly instructed. I opened a new document and began typing. Technical brief, patent ownership and licensing structure of Vanguard Systems core technology. Let her ask for documentation. I'd give her exactly what she requested, the truth, in black and white, ready to be submitted to every investor, every board member, every tech journalist who'd listen. The countdown had begun. The Series C announcement hit TechCrunch on a Tuesday morning. Vanguard Systems seeks $50 million to scale revolutionary patent portfolio. The headline screamed. Clara's smiling photo dominated the article, with a caption calling her the young innovator revolutionizing enterprise computing. I read the article over my morning coffee, noting every false claim with clinical detachment. Vanguard's proprietary cascade prevention technology. Lie. The company's wholly owned patent portfolio. Lie. Led by Clara Mercer's innovative vision. The biggest lie of all, Daniel had scheduled a company-wide celebration for that afternoon. Champagne in the break room, catered lunch, the whole performance. I watched from my office as employees lined up to congratulate Clara, who held court like a queen receiving subjects. The email came at 2:47 p.m. My transfer to the Special Projects Division, effective immediately. A basement office with no windows, no team, no access to core systems. They didn't even pretend it was anything other than what it was. A corporate gulag designed to make me quit. Your expertise is needed for legacy documentation, Daniel explained when I was summoned to his office. Clara sat beside him, not bothering to hide her smirk. We need someone to archive our old development processes before we modernize. Legacy documentation, I repeated slowly. You want me to document my own obsolescence. That's a rather dramatic way to put it, Daniel said. Think of it as preserving institutional knowledge. While Clara presents my institutional knowledge at the Global Innovation Summit. Clara leaned forward. Actually, Rachel, they're not your anything anymore. You seem confused about how companies work. When you create something as an employee, it belongs to the company. Maybe that's too complex for someone from your generation to understand. Your generation, I was 38, not 68. But to Clara, anyone over 30 was already archaeological. You're right, I said, standing up. I must be confused. I should probably review all my contracts to better understand my position. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. Is that a threat? It's a statement of intent to understand my legal obligations. Unless that's a problem? They exchanged glances. Clara waved her hand dismissively. Whatever helps you sleep at night, just have that documentation ready before the summit. I moved to the basement office that afternoon. It was actually perfect, isolated, private, no unexpected visitors. I set up my laptop and began my real work. First, I contacted 3 board members independently, sending them copies of the actual patent licensing agreements with relevant sections highlighted. In preparation for the Series C due diligence, I wrote, I wanted to ensure all IP documentation is properly disclosed. Next, I reached out to Thomson Reuters, the patent law journal, with an article proposal. The importance of patent ownership verification in tech investments. They accepted immediately, scheduling publication for the week before the summit. But the masterstroke came when I discovered Clara's laptop credentials cached in the system. She'd logged into a development server weeks ago and saved her password, Daddy's Girl 2000. In plain text, amateur move. But what else would you expect from someone who thought coding was just typing? I didn't access her accounts, that would be illegal. But I did note the security vulnerability in a formal report to our cybersecurity team, copying the board's audit committee. The subject line, Critical Security Breach, Executive Credentials Exposed. The response was immediate. An emergency security audit was ordered. All executive accounts were frozen pending investigation. Clara couldn't access any systems for 3 days, right when she needed to prepare her summit presentation. She came storming into my basement office on day 2 of the lockout. You did this, she screamed, her composed facade finally cracking. You're trying to sabotage me. I looked up from my documentation work, blinking innocently. Did what? Report a security vulnerability? That's actually part of my job description. Section 3.2. 5 of the Employee Handbook. All staff must immediately report potential security breaches. You're jealous. You're a bitter old woman who can't stand seeing young talent succeed. Young talent, I repeated, pulling up her LinkedIn profile on my screen. It says here you were a social media consultant before joining Vanguard. What exactly did you consult on? Her face flushed. My father. Your father what? Gave you a job? Gave you credit for my work? Gave you a platform you didn't earn? I'm going to have you fired. Please do, I said calmly. I'm sure the board would love to hear why you want to fire the person who holds the patents your father just promised to $50 million worth of investors. She went pale. For the first time since she'd walked into Vanguard, Clara Mercer looked afraid. What are you talking about? I turned my monitor toward her, showing the licensing agreement. Section 4.1. Upon termination of Rachel Harlow's employment, all patent rights revert immediately to the licensor. That's me, by the way. The licensor. She grabbed her phone, presumably to call Daniel, but I wasn't finished. Your summit presentation, the one where you're showing your cascade prevention system, that's patent US 10-234-567. Mine. The Series C funding deck, based on 6 patents, all mine. The government contract your father just signed requires technology that disappears the moment I walk out that door. Clara's hands were shaking now. You can't. That's not legal. Check with your lawyers. Fair? Ask the gal you dismissed on your first day. Possible? I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd had in weeks. Watch me. She fled, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive perfume and fear. That night, I updated my resume and sent it to Kenji at Orion Dynamics with a simple note, ready to talk. His response came in 12 minutes. Name your price. I named it. It was double my current salary plus a percentage of any product built on my patents. He agreed without negotiation. The next morning, I submitted my formal notice to renew the Q4 patent licensing, with one modification. The fee had increased by 10,000%, as was my right under Section 9.3.1, after material misrepresentation of ownership. The new quarterly licensing fee, $40 million. The exact amount they were trying to raise. The law firm of Brennan, Katz, and Yoshida occupied the top 3 floors of a downtown Austin high-rise. Janet Zhao had arranged the conference room on the 30th floor specifically for its psychological effect. Floor-to-ceiling windows that made visitors feel they were floating above the city, vulnerable and exposed. I sat at the polished table, my folder of documentation arranged precisely in front of me. To my left, Janet reviewed her notes with the calm focus of a surgeon preparing to operate. Across from us, Vanguard's legal team was assembling, 3 lawyers in identical dark suits, their faces carefully neutral. Daniel and Clara entered last. He looked haggard, his usual polish cracked around the edges. Clara had abandoned her designer dresses for a severe black suit, trying to project seriousness she'd never bothered with before. This is extortion, Daniel opened without preamble. This is contract enforcement, Janet replied smoothly. Your company signed these agreements 12 years ago. Mrs. Harlow has honored them faithfully. The terms are clear. $40 million for a quarterly license is absurd. It's precisely calculated, I interjected, speaking for the first time. Based on the valuation you gave investors, if my patents are worth $50 million in investment, then $40 million for exclusive access seems reasonable. Clara couldn't contain herself. You planned this. You've been planning this since you called me gal. No, since you stole credit for my cascade prevention algorithm. Getting warmer. Since your father moved me to a basement office to document my own erasure. Actually, yes. That's exactly when I started planning. Vanguard's lead counsel, a silver-haired man named Richardson, raised his hand for silence. Mrs. Harlow, surely we can reach a reasonable accommodation. You've been with Vanguard for 12 years. There must be some loyalty. Loyalty? I laughed, short and sharp. Where was Vanguard's loyalty when Clara claimed my work? When Daniel demoted me to legacy documentation? When you told investors you owned patents you only license? That's a misunderstanding that can be corrected, Richardson said carefully. Good. Correct it publicly. Issue a press release acknowledging I own the patents. Update the Series C documentation. Have Clara apologize at the summit for misrepresenting her contributions. Daniel's face went red. Absolutely not. We'd lose all credibility. Then pay the $40 million. Or lose access to the patents entirely. Janet slid a document across the table. Option 3. Orion Dynamics has offered to purchase all 6 patents for $75 million. They've already provided proof of funds. The room went silent. I watched Daniel's jaw work as he processed this information. Orion was Vanguard's primary competitor. If they acquired my patents, Vanguard wouldn't just lose their technology, they'd see it weaponized against them. You wouldn't, Clara whispered. Wouldn't I? What was it you said? Maybe it's too complex for someone from my generation to understand. Well, I understand this. I own what you need. And you treated me like I was nothing. Actions have consequences. Richardson was scribbling frantically. We need time to review options. Consult with the board. You have 48 hours, Janet announced. The Orion offer expires at 5 p.m. Thursday. Mrs. Harlow's resignation is effective immediately, which means your patent access terminates at midnight tonight unless a new agreement is signed. Tonight? Daniel stood up so fast his chair rolled backward. Our entire infrastructure runs on those patents, We have government contracts, client obligations. Then you'd better decide quickly, I said, standing as well. 40 million for continued access, a public acknowledgement of my ownership, and a written apology from Clara. Or I walked to Orion with everything. Clara's carefully constructed composure finally shattered completely. You bitter old bitch! You're destroying the company because your feelings got hurt? No, I said, gathering my documents. I'm exercising my legal rights because you and your father tried to steal what was mine. You called me gal and thought that was the end of it. But names have power, Clara, and so do patents. As we reached the door, Richardson called out desperately, "What if we offer you CTO, Daniel's position, full control of R&D, your name on everything going forward?" I paused, looking back at Daniel's stricken face, Clara's fury, the panicking lawyers. Too late, I said simply. That might have worked before you showed me who you really are. Now, I don't want to fix what you broke. I want to watch you explain to your investors why you no longer have the technology you promised them. The next morning, I sat in my home office, watching my phone light up with increasingly frantic messages. Midnight had come and gone. Vanguard systems were already throwing licensing errors. By 6 a.m., their primary server cluster had automatically shut down to avoid legal liability. Marcus texted me. The quantum framework is offline. Emergency board meeting in an hour. Clara's been escorted from the building. At 11:47 a.m., 48 hours before the Orion deadline, Richardson called personally. The board has accepted your terms, he said, sounding defeated. 40 million for 5-year exclusive license, public acknowledgement of your patent ownership, and... He paused. A written apology from Clara Mercer to be published in the company newsletter and read at the Global Innovation Summit. And Daniel. Mr. Mercer has submitted his resignation, effective immediately. I closed my eyes, feeling something that wasn't quite satisfaction but wasn't disappointment either. It was completion. The ending of one story and the beginning of another. Send the contracts to Janet, I said. And Richardson, make sure Clara's apology includes the word gal. I want her to choke on it. The Global Innovation Summit at the Austin Convention Center was the tech event of the year. 3,000 attendees, all the major players, venture capitalists with billions to deploy. And there, on the main stage at 2 p.m. Thursday, stood Clara Mercer. She looked smaller than I remembered, diminished somehow in her designer suit under the harsh stage lights. The conference organizers had refused to let her cancel, despite Vanguard's pleading. Contracts had been signed. Promotions had been paid for. I sat in the third row, my new Orion Dynamics badge clipped to my jacket. Kenji had insisted I attend as their new Chief Innovation Officer. Watch your victory, he'd said. You earned it. The moderator introduced Clara with notably less enthusiasm than scheduled. The recent TechCrunch article, Vanguard Systems in Crisis, Patent Dispute Exposes Fraudulent Claims, had made everyone cautious. Clara approached the podium, a piece of paper trembling in her hands. The screens behind her displayed Vanguard's logo, but nothing else. No technical demonstrations. No groundbreaking presentations. Just a 24-year-old who'd learned that inheritance and hubris weren't enough. Before I begin, her voice cracked, the microphone amplifying her discomfort to 3,000 people. I have a statement to read. The auditorium grew quiet, phones appeared, recording. I, Clara Mercer, formally apologize to Rachel Harlow for misrepresenting her innovations as my own. The Cascade Prevention System, the Predictive Analytics Engine, and all associated technologies are the sole intellectual property of Ms. Harlow. Licensed to Vanguard Systems under specific terms. She paused, swallowing hard. I could see the next part stuck in her throat like glass. I specifically apologize for my demeaning treatment of Ms. Harlow, including my inappropriate use of the term gal to diminish her expertise and contributions. My behavior was unprofessional, disrespectful, and revealed my complete ignorance of the technical foundations I claim to understand. Someone in the audience whistled low. the Twitter feed on my phone was already exploding. Galgate was trending within minutes. Clara continued, her voice now barely above a whisper. Effective immediately. I am resigning from all positions at Vanguard Systems and withdrawing from the technology sector where I lack the competence to contribute meaningfully. She fled the stage before the moderator could react, leaving 3,000 people in stunned silence that erupted into furious discussion. I saw venture capitalists pulling out phones, probably calling their lawyers about the Vanguard investments. Tech reporters were typing frantically. My phone buzzed. A message from the board chair of Vanguard. The $40 million has been transferred. Your patent saved us from complete collapse. Would you consider consulting? I typed back. My consulting rate is $5,000 per hour. Minimum engagement 100 hours. Non-negotiable. There was a long pause before his response. Accepted. That evening, Orion Dynamics held a reception at the Four Seasons. Kenji raised a glass to me in front of his entire leadership team. To Rachel Harlow, who brings us not just 6 game-changing patents, but the expertise to develop 20 more, and who taught the entire industry that genius isn't always loud, young, or male. Sometimes it's quiet, experienced, and patient enough to wait for exactly the right moment. I accepted the toast, thinking about the journey from that humiliating moment in conference room A to standing here, valued at my true worth. Marcus found me on the terrace later, Austin's skyline glittering below us. He'd followed me to Orion, bringing 3 other engineers who'd witnessed everything. Did you see Daniel's LinkedIn? He asked, showing me his phone. The former CTO had already updated his profile to seeking new opportunities. Under his Vanguard experience, he'd written, led digital transformation initiatives and talent acquisition. Talent acquisition, I mused. Is that what we're calling nepotism now? Clara deleted all her social media. Marcus added, complete digital disappearance. I thought about Clara, probably in her luxury apartment, facing the reality that money couldn't buy competence and connections couldn't create capability. Part of me felt, not sympathy exactly, but a recognition of waste. She could have learned, could have grown, could have become something real instead of a reflected glory. But she'd chosen the shortcut, the easy path of taking rather than creating. My phone lit up with another message, this one from a reporter at the Wall Street Journal. Ms. Curie, Harlow, would you be available for an interview about patent rights and gender dynamics in tech? We're doing a feature on the Vanguard situation. I started to decline, then reconsidered. Yes, I typed, but I choose the photographer. And the headline must include the word gal. Let's reclaim it. The next morning's Wall Street Journal featured my photograph on the front page of the business section. The headline read, The Gal Who Held 6 Patents and a Company's Future, How Rachel Harlow Turned Dismissal into Dominance. In the article, I said something that would follow Clara Mercer for the rest of her attempted career comebacks. She called me gal like it was nothing. Now she has nothing. Funny how that worked out. Daniel Mercer never got another CTO position. Every search committee Googled him and found the story of how he'd nearly destroyed a company by letting his daughter play executive with other people's innovations. Clara attempted a comeback 2 years later with a lifestyle brand called Learning Curves, positioning herself as someone who'd grown from mistakes. It failed within 6 months. The internet never forgets. And, we remember the gal became the automatic response to every venture she attempted. But that was all in the future. That night, standing on the terrace with Austin spread below me like a circuit board, I pulled out my phone and typed one final message to my old Vanguard email account before it was deactivated. To whom it may concern, the gal has left the building. The patents went with her. Then I blocked the number, dropped the phone in my purse, and went inside to my new future, one where no one would ever call me gal again without understanding exactly what that word would cost them. The Austin sunset painted the sky in shades of copper and gold as I walked out of the Four Seasons, my heels clicking against the pavement with a rhythm I'd never noticed before, confident, unhurried, mine. The valet brought my car, a sensible Honda I'd driven for 8 years, and I smiled at the thought that I could afford a Tesla now. A Porsche, hell, a Lamborghini if I wanted. But I didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. The drive home took me past the Vanguard Systems building, its glass facade reflecting the dying light like a monument to corporate hubris. The parking lot was half empty at what should have been peak hours. Word traveled fast in Austin's tech scene. Employees were already jumping ship, recruiters circling like vultures over a fresh kill. My phone sat silent on the passenger seat. No more 2 a.m. emergency calls about system failures. No more condescending emails from executives who couldn't code "Hello World" if their stock options depended on it. No more being called gal by someone young enough to be my daughter and foolish enough to think youth was wisdom. I thought about power as I drove. Not the kind that comes from titles or corner offices or having a famous last name, but real power. The kind that lives in knowledge, in creation, in the ability to build something from nothing but neurons firing and fingers flying across keyboards. Clara had thought power was inherited, transferred like a trust fund from father to daughter. She'd learned too late that real power is earned, patent by patent, line of code by line of code, in the small hours when no one's watching and nobody's there to steal the credit. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. 38 years old, laugh lines that Clara would probably call wrinkles. Gray strands I'd never bothered to dye because I was too busy solving problems that mattered. I looked exactly like what I was, a woman who'd spent 12 years building something remarkable and who'd finally gotten paid what she was worth. The light turned green. I drove on. Back in my apartment, I poured a glass of wine, the good stuff now. A 2015 Bordeaux I'd been saving for a special occasion that never seemed special enough until today. The city sparkled beyond my balcony. All those lights representing dreams and ambitions, most of which would fail because people like Clara and Daniel thought success could be inherited or stolen rather than earned. My laptop sat open on the coffee table, showing 37 unread emails from recruiters, journalists, and tech conferences wanting to hear my story. Tomorrow, I'd answer them. Tomorrow, I'd start working on the next 6 patents for Orion. Tomorrow, I'd begin building something even better than what I'd left behind. But tonight, I sat in the gathering darkness and let myself feel the weight of what had happened. Not just the victory. Anyone can win when they hold all the cards. But the transformation. The moment when being called gal stopped being an insult and became a battle cry. I thought about Clara one last time, probably in her high-rise apartment, maybe finally understanding that respect isn't inherited and innovation isn't something you can buy with daddy's money. She'd wanted to be seen as a visionary, a disruptor, a leader. Instead, she'd become a cautionary tale, a name that would make HR departments cringe for decades. Strange how a single word could destroy so much. Strange how dismissing someone as gal could cost $40 million, 2 careers, and a company's reputation. Strange, but not surprising. Not to anyone who understood that the quiet ones, the ones you overlook, the ones you call gal while stealing their work, those are the ones who can burn your kingdom down with nothing more than a contract clause and the patience to wait for the perfect moment. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from Janet. The wire transfer is complete. $40 million. What are you going to do now? I typed back. Build something they could never understand. And this time, I'll put my name on it in letters too big to ignore. The Austin night embraced the city. And somewhere in that darkness, Daniel Mercer was probably updating his resume while Clara learned that influencer doesn't qualify you for anything that matters. But I wasn't thinking about them anymore. I was thinking about tomorrow, about the next patent, about the sweet satisfaction of being underestimated right up until the moment you reveal your hand. They called me gal. Now they call my lawyer. And that shift, that precise moment when dismissal turns to desperation, when the person you ignored becomes the one you desperately need, that's worth more than $40 million. That's worth everything. Thank you so much for listening to this story of sweet revenge and justice served cold in the corporate world. If you enjoyed Rachel's journey from being dismissed as just a gal to holding all the cards? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Where are you listening to this story from? Drop a comment below and let's connect. Whether you're commuting in New York, taking a break in London, or winding down for the evening in Tokyo, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of underdogs who triumph and bullies who get exactly what they deserve. Share your own workplace revenge stories in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated only to prove them spectacularly wrong? Let's discuss.